You're watching The Front Row. Thank you for staying with us. I'm seeing a number of your tweets here. We're talking about the handshake 3 years on. How far have we come as a country? Is the center holding a lot of politics and mistrust currently, both on President Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga's camps? So what does the future hold with just about a year to the general election? Before we get back to a panelist, let's take a look at what you're saying online. Andy Nestor says, us as local wananchi have never had any problem. Politicians are the ones having their differences. Handshake was between two people, but having constitutional amendment will affect all of us. We need all people on board, including Linda Katiba. And he continues to say that David Ndii has a point. Linda Katiba must be included in the table of discussion. Constitutional amendment must be largely acceptable by many Kenyans. I never saw any engagement in my hometown, and I have input as a young Kenyan, but we were denied that. Well, Petrichor, I hope I've said it right, says, the democracy says there shall be a voting and the winner forms the government while the second forms the opposition. Majority and minority respectively. It's no longer democracy that the opposition joins the government. So then why do we vote? He continues to ask that. And I can also see Maranga Mangi here say, David Ndii is giving some wonderful insights. The winner take it all is already taken care of. If one loses the presidential seat, he does not lose his MPs. We don't need to modify our constitutional. Finally, Washika Bena says, the handshake has served very little to bring peace in the country. On the flip side, it has divided Kenyans on tribal lines more than before. It was not pro-Wanjiko at all. Just some of the thoughts from Kenyans who are watching the show. And, back to the panelists, David Ndii, that earlier on, after that status meeting of what I'd say the G7 happened, they promised that there would be a bigger meeting today, to just mark the 3rd anniversary of the handshake, that this did not happen. What are you reading into this?
Let me start by making an observation that probably should have come a bit earlier. Uhuru Kenyatta is a sworn enemy of the Constitution of Kenya 2010. He has been trying to claw back the powers of the imperial presidency since he became president. He has spoken, I have heard him say, that were it not for this constitution, were it the old constitution, he would have been able to do a lot more. When his election was nullified, he saw that he would revisit, and we have seen that he not only revisited the Supreme Court, he has revisited the judiciary, and now I think he's revisiting the constitution. What am I saying? What the handshake seemed to have done is given Uhuru Kenyatta and the people like him who are against this constitution an opportunity to claw back on the accountability structures and the many mechanisms or controls on power that they do not like. And if you look at how it has evolved, it doesn't look at this point in time, in fact, as if Raila Odinga has actually, their side has any say. And he's just there, I think, because he's very heavily invested in the process in terms of his 2022 politics. The kind of impunity we have seen because of the NASA joining being on sort of undermining opposition. I mean, I'm thinking about unconstitutional things like the demolitions we have seen in Kisumu, the demolitions. I saw some others in Naivasha not too long ago. There was the ones in Ruai, those sort of things. It has given Uhuru Kenyatta a carte blanche to completely disobey the constitution. So I think one of the things that we are missing about the handshake is not its promise, but the damage that it is already doing to democracy and the rule of law in the constitution. And everything we are seeing seems to point to the fact that by 2022, if this process goes through, we will probably be back in in terms of substance politically to 1988. That is what the by-elections we have just had seem to suggest. Now, when you're talking about the violence and seeing this as part of the old culture, I want us to look at, there was a what would have been an inconsequential by-election for an MCA in Makueni that pitted Kalonzo Musyoka and Kivutha Kibwana. Now, it was very vicious, with the state actually interfering on the side of Kalonzo Musyoka. Why is that? That is a direct consequence of the kind of politics of tribal kingpins that BBI wants to introduce. Because for you to have a place at that table of the kingpins of the 5 big tribes, you have to demonstrate that you are actually the political kingpin of your region, and you have a monopoly of political sort of power in that place. So because both Kibwana and Kalonzo seem to be contending for the kingpins in probably different formations, they had to invest very heavily in that by-election. It's the same thing in Western Kenya. It seems that whoever is favored there, it looks like it might be Musalia Mudavadi. It was very important that it be demonstrated that he's the kingpin of that region.
All right.
So this is a direct consequence of BBI. Politically, it has already done a lot of damage, and some of the changes that it is proposing are actually going to increase the sort of these kingpins. If this goes through, you cannot rule out that they will evolve into warlords.
So then back to my question on the failure of a meeting taking place to mark the 3rd year of the handshake or anniversary of the handshake. Do you think it's just a matter of time before the handshake is in complete disarray, or there's still hope for it?
Hope for what? The handshake began as a handshake between 2 principals on the steps of Harambee House. And they were saying there were 2 presidents who had been sworn in, people's president, national president, and there was all that sort of thing of elevating the 2. They wrote that document which said that this is their personal leadership initiative where they are going to sort of engage Kenyans in bringing peace. We have had 2 meetings back to back. Convened now by Uhuru Kenyatta in State House with 7 people. Yeah, I think the only change between this and the previous one was that this one I saw, I think Hassan Joho had replaced Charity. But clearly, what's going on now is they ought not to be having any negotiations or conflict, because if they have passed the BBI sort of constitution amendment bill through the county assemblies, so really what they should be doing now is moving on to the next stage. What problems are they having? The problems they are having are problems of a political nature, because it seems that Raila Odinga had expectations that the BBI, particularly the Popular Initiative, would favor him politically. It seems that the state sort of the bureaucrats and probably even Uhuru Kenyatta have different ideas. And what this is telling us really is that it has sort of like degenerated into just sort of parochial power politics. In the meantime, at the back, we have a constitutional amendment bill which seems that somebody is determined to ram it through the country, and that will claw back a lot of power. The other thing that it actually does is once the BBI is not the end, if they are able to push this through, you have now opened the 2010 constitution, which you have not been able to do for the last 10 years. And once you open it, the floodgates will open. What else will they go for? I don't think if BBI referendum goes through, we will have the 2010 constitution by 2022.
Fair enough. I'd really like to bring in Adam Solo at this point when we're talking about the constitutional amendment bill. Deputy President William Ruto has been adamant that he is not going to mount a no campaign, but then in the same breath has raised concerns about this document that seemingly are getting support from those in his camp. Is there a likelihood, from where you sit, Adam Solo, that there would be an Ivasha situation situation than like what we saw in the run-up to 2010, perhaps to bring everyone on board and tweak a number of things? Or the train has really left the station? Are we likely to see some changes before then?
I think, Akisa Wandera, we have already seen the changes. If you remember, after we presented our document in Bomas, there was subsequently an equivalent of an Naivasha, where leaders of political parties were invited to State House. And there was a committee of politicians, I heard Salim Davadi talking about it the other day, where they negotiated the issues that had to be brought on board. Those who also listened to Deputy President William Ruto in Bomas, quite a number of issues that he raised were also factored in the document. From where I sit, I think that generally the document that was now unveiled in KICC as the Constitution of Kenya 2020 Amendment Bill, I think right now it has left the station, and I think that it's for the people of Kenya to decide. I think that from where I sit in terms of democracy, I think that the people are going to have the last word on this document. Whether the turnout is high or not, constitutionally, it's neither here nor there. But from where I sit now, both sides, those who are for, those who are against, I think that's the nature of a democratic society. You go out there the way it happened in 2005, and the majority of the people rejected. You go out there the way it happened in 2010, and the majority of people approved. And in 2005, the reality was accepted that the document was unpopular. In 2010, the document was accepted that it was popular, and it became our constitution. And therefore, in 2022, if it is rejected, then the status quo remains. If it is passed, then the new document becomes part of our laws. And I think that what I wanted also to say is that the lack of them meeting today is more of that they had announced it. I think that my recollection, Akisa, I don't remember the first anniversary and the second anniversary being marked. Maybe this was just a way of the politicians who are pro the Constitution coming together and taking advantage of a day that was harnessed under Harambee House. That's the way I would look at it.
So we are reading too much into it. That's what you say?
Not exactly. I don't have the facts of what happened. I don't think even that there was any alert that this is the reason why we didn't meet. What I know of politicians is that issues can arise, itineraries can change. So we'll have to wait and hear exactly what happened.
All right, Komodo Waiganja, we don't have too much time, so maybe a minute each as we close, perhaps just get your closing remarks. So then we're now gearing up for a referendum and later on an election. A lot of mistrust in the camps that are Odinga and Kenyatta. If sentiments that we saw the other day from Orengo and Otiende Amolo are anything to go by, so what are we likely to see in the next coming days?
Akisa, I don't lie awake worried about what politicians are saying. You know, because sometimes what they're saying is not what they mean, and there are very many underlying conversations that are not obvious. So I wouldn't take that issue too seriously until I heard of it from either President Uhuru Kenyatta or former Prime Minister Raila Odinga. Then I would know that we are really in crisis. The rest is about jostling for political advantage in light of probably even funding for the referendum. I don't know. But I think one of the things, two things I'd like to say, whether we like it or not, this country as of now, maybe unfortunately, still revolves around kingpins. Even though we say that this was an agreement signed by two individuals, Those two individuals come to the country. And that is also what happened in 2007. So in a sense, we must recognize that as part of our political reality. The other thing I want to say is we forget sometimes why it was important to expand the executive. I hear what David is saying about kingpins and the danger that can arise if we elevate the question of tribal kingpins. But there's a greater danger if we had retained the very thin pyramid of our current system, where we have only two people at the top, because inevitably you'd almost have had the same coalition of ethnicities getting to the presidency until that time when we start voting not on ethnic lines. And we needed to unlock that so that people do not feel excluded. Inevitably, if we hadn't done that, the sort of constellation we had was going to be a very dangerous constellation, because we have certain communities that would almost be guaranteed to be able to hog the presidency. At the end of the day, I agree with David about the need, the weakness of the opposition post the handshake. Isn't that therefore need where we must then celebrate the creation of a possible stronger political opposition, which does not need to be in government? Because I think one of the misunderstandings that people have is that BBI brings both the losers and the winners into government. It doesn't. It says if you lose, then you have the political profile necessary to hold government in check, not somebody who's an MP who's called a leader of majority, but he has no political power. So I think there are certain things. They say the enemy of the good is the best. Sometimes the end of them is an unachievable best. I'm a political pragmatist. I think what BBI does is take us a little forward in some respects. There is a danger of clawbacks, of course, but I think it achieves more and takes us further than where we are today. What we hope is that we'll have the political environment and goodwill to enhance that which BBI has created.
David Ndeye, for those of you who have been adamant that you're not going to support this initiative, and that's the BBI, what's the way forward then? We've seen more than half the counties have passed it. It's now heads to the National Assembly. What next?
The Constitution is not broken. And the process by which we are being told that we have seen, we saw the provincial administration unleashed to coerce people to collect signatures. That was not necessary. We saw a complete intimidation and open bribery of the county assemblies. That was not necessary. So what we are having is constitution amendment or constitutional overhaul by a process of impunity. It's actually unconstitutional amendment. The process we are going through, the result will not be dissimilar if it goes through to Obote's pigeonhole constitution, which unraveled Uganda. So for me, the sanctity of the constitution that the 2010 constitution has enjoyed for the last 10 years, the legitimacy it has with the people, that is what is under assault. I think it was possible to go through this, if it was necessary, in a much more, in a constitutional, also more politically inclusive, more mature process. But I think this process that is being used, this draconian, this sort of disrespect for the rule of law, is deliberately intended to water down constitutionalism, to desecrate the constitution, lower it in the standing of the people. And that's what we have a fundamental problem with.
Thank you.
That the intent, there is very evident ill intent, and I do not think that people who are abusing power the way that they are doing at this moment, once they get what they want, they are going to revert to actually becoming something they've never been.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, we have to end it at that point. Not too much time left. Kamodho Waiganjo, constitutional expert. Adam Solo served as vice chairperson of the BBI Secretariat Committee, and David Ndeye, economist, were my panelists tonight, just helping us break down the issues, reflect on the 3rd anniversary of the handshake, how far we have come and what happens next. It's a matter of wait and see to just see how things will pan out from here. Thank you for engaging with us tonight here on the front row. I am Akisa Wandera. I'll see you next time.